गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणस्पत आनः शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्रयवतो गणेशाय नमः सरस्वत्यै नमः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः
Om Shri Sai Ram. I am Sushmita, participant of NLP 2021 batch, and I hail from the city of the Pearls. Dear brothers and sisters, a warm welcome to you all for today's Sasangatve Nisangatvam episode 7. I'm extremely honored to introduce the speaker for today's satsang. May I please request for the AV now?
Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba on customs and character says, where dharma is, God is, and where God is, there will be victory. Where God is not, it is impossible to gain success. The customs and manners that go with Indian culture make us respected. Dharma is enshrined in that action or law, custom or conduct. Our speaker for this evening is a true example of his customs and in the department of customs itself. God's servant, truly customized to serve the nation. I am honored to introduce Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury IRS of the 1989 batch, who is presently serving as Chief Commissioner of Customs at Chennai. His rich experience in matters of economic intelligence and investigations resulted in him being selected on merits for various crucial and critical assignments in all revenue administrations, namely Customs, Central Excise Service Tax and Value-Added Tax. Having held key positions in imports, exports, anti-smuggling work of the Customs Department, he has also acquired considerable expertise on functioning of 100% export-oriented units, special economic zones, software technology parks, export promotion schemes and trade agreements. Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury has acumen and adeptness for gathering intelligence on economic offences, commercial frauds, detecting major modus operandi and accomplishing successful investigations against evaders with power linkages. As Principal Commissioner GST, Mumbai Commissionerate, Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury evolved and strengthened the data analytics. He worked as a member of IGST committee as a part of the exercises involved in the evolution of GST. On specific request by the government of Andhra Pradesh, Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury went on deputation to the Commercial Tax Department from 2007 to 2011 for coordinating in implementing the VAT Act and to head the enforcement wing. A special mention of Pune Customs was made by DGHRD for the Swachhata Action Plan and the short film documenting the Swachh Bharat programs. Narcotic drugs of 26 cases for the period 1994 to 2016 were disposed of in an eco-friendly manner at Maharashtra Enviro Power Limited Common Hazardous Waste Treatment Storage Disposal Facility, Ranjangaon, Pune. As Commissioner, Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury took initiative to get administrative approval and sanction for 2 HDPE floating jetties at Devgarh and Ratnagiri for secure and exclusive berthing of the departmental vessels, the first of its kind by CBEC. In spite of wide and variegated exposure, rich experience in matters of economic intelligence and investigations, Shri M.V.S. Chowdhury is known for his intentional and compulsive maintenance of low profile despite being par excellence in all arenas with which he is associated. For his commitment, dedication and exemplary performance, he was awarded the prestigious President of India's Appreciation Certificate for specifically distinguished record of service in 2001 in his 11th year of service. The award is normally given to the officers with a minimum of 15 years service. He is the only officer in the department to achieve this rare recognition. Deccan Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture Pune has conferred the award for excellence in public service in the year 2018. Shri MVS Chowdhury is a school topper in ICSE and a state rank holder in PUC Karnataka. He is a gold medalist in BA in Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning and MA gold medalist in the Central University of Hyderabad. He was awarded a National Merit Scholarship for MPhil and PhD programs. Before joining the civil services, he worked as a lecturer in political science in Central University of Hyderabad for a few months. As a part of extracurricular and social activities, Shri MVS Chowdhury is actively associated and participated in the adult literacy programs, afforestation and cyclone relief programs launched by Ms. Kumudben Joshi, former governor of Andhra Pradesh. He won the Best All-Rounder Award in the Central University of Hyderabad for the year 1987-88. And during the same year, he was elected as President of the Students' Union of Central University of Hyderabad. He was a consistently performing athlete at school, college and university levels and was a captain of college teams for volleyball and basketball. Shri MVS Chowdhury started Srimati Yarlagatta Jayalakshmi Memorial Charitable Trust in memory of his mother for the purpose of developing and improving social, educational and health standards of people in the native village of Bendapudi and adjoining villages. Dear brothers and sisters, let us put our hands together and welcome Shri MVS Chowdhury to address this evening's satsang.
Sairam sir, a warm welcome to you to today's satsang. Over to you, sir.
Om Sai Ram. My most profound and reverential salutations at the divine feet of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, respectable Sri Nimish Pandya, All India President, Sri Sathya Sai Seva Organizations, Dr. Gopi Krishna Pidatala, Convener, Sri Sathya Sai National Learning Program for Self-Transformation, Ms. Visalakshmi, Communication Coordinator, and dear students, I extend a warm welcome to you all. I take it as a great pleasure and a rare privilege conferred on me to be here this evening after a very, very long decades of my association with Sathya Sai organizations, to be here and share my views on leadership. Before I go into this topic, as I speak on leadership, I was just remembering how Swami used to call me when I was studying in Whitefield during 79 to 84. See, most of you are aware that old Brindavan building, maybe most of you belong to the younger generation, you would have been seeing the present building there. Swami, once in a while when he was there, he used to regularly come out and give darshan. So when normally he used to once in a while suddenly inquire about me. He would say, where is Bangaru, where is he? Then I would mostly be associated with the cooperative stores where you find a huge concrete structure now in Whitefield. Those days it was actually a shed with some roofing and all this. And mostly since I was associated with a lot of cultural activities there, I would always be missing Swami's darshan when he comes out. So when he inquires, I would get a message that Swami is inquiring for me. And I would rush immediately to the gate of that old Brindavan Swami's building. Then he would look at me and say, where are you? I would tell him, Swami, I have gone, I was organizing these cooperative stores and all this. Then Swami very fondly will say, you are a leader. So you are a leader. So you don't want to have my darshan. You are doing all leadership activities in the ashram. And I would say, Swami, because this is also very important. But then you would also smilingly point to the other visitors there or devotees that he is a leader, our future leader. Yes. So that is how you always used to call me. And I feel it's a strange coincidence that today I'm talking to you on leadership qualities. Even when I was graduating from, after I completed my graduation at Brindavan Satsai College, I had to decide on my future career. I was one of the first batches of Satsai Institute of Higher Learning. But that point of time, there was only one course, that is studies in Indian culture. I was always interested to do in political science, and it was my favorite subject. So I had this dilemma. So once I asked Swami, now my degree is completed. Now, what is your advice? Then Swami said, why don't you do the university here in Indian culture? But I said, Swami, I want to do in political science. That is a very interesting, for me, I'm fascinated by the subject. I've always been scoring very high marks. Then very fondly he said, yes, you are a future leader and your presence is more required outside. So you please go, and you have to, a leader is one who keeps changing and impacts others' lives. So you have to go and work in the society. So you go with all my blessings, it will be there with you. That is how he blessed me and sent me the last day when I was coming out after completing my graduation. So I always feel he has blessed me because I have been working in different capacities in last 33 years in government service in various organizations. I always felt sometimes it's a very small organization. As an assistant commissioner, you had a very small formation. Now as a chief commissioner, you had an entire state apparatus or organizational machinery, and you got a chance to impact by your values, by your thinking, by your work culture, your subordinates. So it is with this that I feel I have a lot to share this evening with all the young people gathered here, that on this aspect of leadership. See, leadership to me, as most sociologists would understand, it's a social process. But most of us think it is a destination. It's not a destination. That means you reach a particular rank or a stage in life, you don't mean you have achieved leadership. Leadership is something that you will have to work at regularly throughout your career, regardless of what level you reach in your organization. Leadership is less about a strong or charismatic individual and more about a group of people working together to achieve results. That is why we say that leadership is a journey. It is continuous. You have to come across different teams, projects, situations, and organizations will require you to apply these skills in different and various ways. Leadership is therefore a journey that is measured by what you make of it. If you savor the ups and downs and welcome the challenges, you might find real satisfaction in every step you take. There are moments of overwhelming joy in the accomplishments that move you forward. Leadership is the capacity to translate one's own vision into a reality. Leadership is lifting a person's vision to high heights, the raising of a person's performance to a higher standard, and the building of a personality beyond its normal limitations. The most dangerous and widely cultivated myth about leadership is that leaders are born and that there is a genetic factor to leadership. That is why we arrive at such a conclusion, is because we generally see in our country today, most of the state leaderships in government or in entrepreneurial organizations, it is passed on from one generation to generation. That is why we always attribute it to a genetic factor in leadership. But to me, it is nothing but sheer nonsense. And in fact, it is the opposite that is true. Leaders are made rather than born. The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. The very essence of leadership is that you should have a vision. I had a chance to interact in the last so many decades with many political leaders at various levels. I've always found, even at a constituency level, an ordinary MLA, he also need to have a vision of what he is going to do, how he develops his followers and all. But it's got to be a vision you articulate very clearly and forcibly on every occasion. But why we suffer from our leadership is they have the vision, but they don't have the capacity to influence your subordinates towards that vision. You can't blow an uncertain trumpet. The challenge of leadership is to be strong, but not rude. Be kind, but not weak. Be bold, but not to bully. Be thoughtful, but not lazy. Be humble, but not timid. Be proud, but not arrogant. Have humor, but without a folly. In periods where there is no leadership, the society stands at a still. Progress occurs only when courageous and skillful leaders seize the opportunity to change the things for better. Effective leadership is not about making speeches or being liked. Leadership is defined by results and not attributes. At this point, I would like to quote from Swami Vivekananda's concept of leader or leadership, that it is not merely a position where someone gets the necessary power to give command over a group of other men and women or treat them like servants. From Swami Vivekananda's point of view, leadership is a work of responsibility. It is a duty. Swami Vivekananda preached sacrifice, dedication, service, and work commitment. He aroused the highest capabilities in a man by reminding them of their own divinity that made anything possible. In fact, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, he often used to tell us when we were at the students in his college, he would often tell, all of you are all divine. Aham Brahmasmi. All of us are born divine. We are all born with the divinity. But it is how you progress yourself in the course of your socialization. All great leaders remain deeply dedicated to their work. It doesn't matter what you are doing, but how you are doing it that makes the ultimate difference. Great opportunities are always possible for the one who is dedicated to his work. And the most important leadership qualities are integrity. Next. And integrity is the quality of having a strong ethical or moral principles and following them at all times, no matter who is watching. Keep your promises even if it takes extra effort. A person with integrity acts with honesty, honor, and truthfulness. Integrity is essential for the individual and the organization. And this is where the critical aspect that lacks in most of our leaderships we find today. Integrity is especially important for top-level executives who are charting the organization's course and making countless other significant decisions. Any organization should reinforce the importance of integrity to leaders at various levels. And next is an important aspect of leadership is that you should have the ability to delegate. Delegating is one of the most core responsibilities of a leader, but it can be tricky to delegate effectively. The goal is just not to free yourself from work. It's also to enable, facilitate teamwork, provide autonomy, lead to better decision making. In order to delegate well, you also need to build trust with your own team. And the next, having built your own team, the next most important thing is how you communicate. Effective leadership and effective communication are intertwined. You need to be able to communicate in a variety of ways, from transmitting information to make understand people you are dealing with. And you must be able to listen to and communicate with a wide range of people across with different roles, social identities, and more. The quality and effectiveness of communication across your institution or organization directly affects the success of your strategy, aim, or target. And the next essential thing in leadership is self-awareness. That is knowing your own self. This is what Swami used to say. You should always honestly introspect yourself, and every stage you should start doing your own self-awareness. While this is more an inwardly focused skill, self-awareness is paramount for leadership. The better you understand yourself, the more effective you can be. You should know how other people view you or how you should show up at work. The most important thing is every one of us should be aware of our own strengths, aware of our own weaknesses, and awareness of your own dark side. Self-awareness of your emotional triggers and how you can strengthen each component. And being gratitude, displaying gratitude is also an important aspect of leadership. Being thankful can make you a better leader. Gratitude can lead to a higher self-esteem, reduced depression and anxiety, and even better sleep. Few people regularly say thank you at work. Even though most people say they would be willing to work harder for a very appreciative boss. Learn how to give thanks and practice more gratitude, not only at workplace, but also in every sphere of your life. Learning agility, it is an individual's ability and willingness to learn from their work experiences and then apply these lessons in order to perform well in new and challenging leadership situation. Learning agility is the ability to know what to do when you don't know what to do. Anybody can foster learning agility through practice, experience, and effort. Great leaders are always great learners and listeners. Learning agility is the core component of any organization strategy for creating future leaders. And the next aspect I would like to dwell is on influence. For some people, influence, you treat it like a very dirty word. You always have a negative connotation for it. But being able to convince people through logical, emotional, or cooperative appeals is a component of being a very inspiring and effective leader. Influence is something different from manipulation, and it needs to be done authentically and more transparently. It requires an emotional intelligence and trust. Typically, good leaders try to influence others using positive influence techniques like logical persuading, legitimizing, exchanging, consulting, alliance building, and appealing to values. Empathic leadership is the ability to lead while understanding the context, experiences, and needs of others, and being aware of their thoughts and feelings. It is the ability to live and experience the story of another as if it were our own. If you show more inclusive leadership and empathetic behaviors towards the people surrounding you, then you are more likely to be viewed as a better leader and a performer. And the most important, another aspect of leadership is that you should have courage. It can be hard to speak up at work, whether you want to voice a new idea or provide feedback or flag a concern to someone above your level or to your boss. This is what you all normally find in all government organizations. We are governed by a strict hierarchy, and generally there is no free flow of ideas from one level of hierarchy to the other. And courage is the key skill for becoming good leaders. Rather than avoiding problems or allowing conflict to fester, courage enables leaders to step up and move things in the right direction. And next thing of leadership is the quality of showing respect. Treating people with respect on a daily basis is one of the most important things a leader can do. It will ease tensions and conflict, create trust, and improve effectiveness. Respect is more than the absence of disrespect, and it can be shown in many different ways. With my own experience, I can say very emphatically that you can all develop a culture of respect at your workplace by treating people how you'd like to be treated with kindness, courtesy, and politeness. Encourage other co-workers with you to share their valuable ideas. Actively listen to others. In fact, whenever somebody credits me with some achievement in whatever postings I've done in the last 33 years, many people often say, you are a very lucky hand, you got a lot of results, you're born lucky. But I would often intervene and say, it's not the question of luck or anything. It is because I always developed an habit where I would have spent a lot of my time and energy to listen to my colleagues, to listen to my subordinates. Sometimes your subordinates help you to evolve more mature decisions than what you are capable of. And it is this habit of listening is of a very important quality. And use others' people ideas to increase your own productivity and efficiency. While successful leaders may exhibit these leadership skills to varying degrees, all good leaders leverage at least some or most of these characteristics. Without these skills, true leadership is just impossible. The first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you. In between, the leader is just a servant. A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself first. When you become a leader, success is all about making others to grow. A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the quality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. It is better to lead from behind. It is better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory, when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is a danger or a failure. Then people will appreciate your leadership. Another important aspect of good leader is morality. Moral leadership is something everyone can strive for. It can be difficult to attain, but it is worth the challenge for yourself and those around you. Know your values, check your ego at the door, embrace others, be transformative, and seek unity. Take responsibility to build a better world for all. I would like now to come to the most important aspect of leadership and what it is lacking in most of the leaderships in either the government or organizations or in the private sector is to make people understand that an important aspect of a good leadership is ethics. There are several types of ethical leadership behaviors one can practice. Set an example first. Practice what you preach. Publicly champion the importance of ethics. Communicate ethics. Make decisions based on values. Make decisions. Establish zero tolerance for ethical violation. Practice justice in every aspect. Moral leadership puts a great emphasis on the role of ethics in key decision making. With the emergence of ethics initiatives via organizational code of ethics and code of conduct, moral leadership is a requirement today. Also, with the growth of social media, people around the world are able to judge and share their comments on leadership decisions, which increase the need of morality in life. Moral leadership that demonstrates superior virtues, self-discipline, and unselfishness is very important. It entails setting an example for others about the rightness or wrongness of particular actions. Morality is a critical factor in leadership that its absence could turn an otherwise powerful leadership model into a disastrous outcome. Importance of morality for leaders is self-evident in light of the far-reaching effects of leaders' actions or inactions on other people. Moral leaders have a sense of self and are not threatened by others, but they also recognize that their self is not the most important thing and that leadership is not about them. As a leader, choose the values and the ethics that are most important to you. The values and ethics you believe in and that define your character. Then live them visibly every day at work. Living your values is one of the most powerful tools available to you to help you lead and influence others. Leaders should know what they value. They also recognize the importance of ethical behavior. The best leaders exhibit both their values and their ethics in their leadership style and actions. Your leadership ethics and values should be visible because you live them in your actions every single day. If leaders have identified and shared their values, living their values daily, visibly, it will create trust. Ethical leadership demonstrates a high regard for values. Moral leaders guide themselves with values and ethics that they develop over time and with experience. When leaders demonstrate values through their actions, they lead by example and also their ethical culture. Leaders who empower people to make decisions that affect their lives, give them the authority to act and make them take responsibility that creates leaderships on all levels of the organization. I would like to conclude by saying that having spent so many years in service, sometimes I do ponder when people keep crediting me with this achievement or that achievement. I always feel it was the type of education and the grooming that we got in the divine precincts of Vrindavan that we have been able to evolve as successful leaders and show to our people who work with us in our various organizations or different departments that we work, that the importance of observing ethics in our day-to-day life. With these words, I would like to conclude, and I thank for the organizer for giving me this excellent opportunity to interact with the youngsters and who all are the future evolving leaders and who are going to shape the next generations. I feel I'm really blessed and to be here with all of you this evening. I wish you all very best, and I hope to look forward with many, because we all belong to that one family of Sathya Sai Baba. We all are influenced by his life and his teachings. And the best thing that we can pay our tributes to him is by following whatever he has told us in his lifetime. Thank you all very much. Om Sai Ram.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you so much for the lofty ideas and idealistic practices and behaviors of leadership. We would now show this forum open for question and answer sessions. I request all the participants to stay on mute until you are called out, and when we call out your names, you kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Stay limited to one question per person. Do not ask a linked question thereafter. So you can raise your hand when you want to ask a question.
More than questions, it's not a question answer. It's not like physics or chemistry that you ask a question and I give you an exact answer. It is more of an interaction and sharing each one's perceptions or ideas.
So who wants to go first? Can the first participant unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, please? Or you can send in your... Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sai Ram sir, this is Bharatwaj from Tamil Nadu. I have one question for you. As a leader, how you maintain your emotional thoughts. Sometimes there will be a situation where you want to balance that. How did you do that, sir?
See, maintaining emotional stability in your decision making and in the situations that you are in is a very important aspect. And but as always, I don't know whether you have read E.M. Foster's article. See, emotionally, we may be, for example, I have seen myself when you are governed with doing some decision making, you may be emotionally inclined to have a favorable assessment of a particular individual or situation. But it's always important that you should put your emotions under control and balance and then take a decision. Otherwise, it's very difficult if you take emotional decisions, because you, in a leadership role, you are influencing an organization and its outcome. So it's always important to maintain emotional stability. But as human beings, we all are very emotional, and it's very easy to say that we have maintained emotional, but we are often prone to like. We all have strong likes, strong dislikes. But I always would keep checking once every time, saying that, see, as E.M. Foster said, that you have to have a tolerance for everyone. You can't say that I emotionally like or emotionally dislike somebody, or I judge a situation in this. You should learn to be more tolerant and observant and take a balanced view.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir. The next participant can please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, please.
Saram sir, this is Sai Prakash from Tamil Nadu. So my question is, at your position, the great power comes with the great responsibility, right? So in that stage, you must have encountered various scenarios and situations that test your ethics and morality. Could you share your insight on your lifetime, real-time story, if there was something, and how have you handled it?
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to answer in a few lines this thing. See, all of us, when we come out of the university, when you join a service, you have a great degree of idealism. You think you are going to change and you have a lot of power and all this. But when you start actually getting into each role and when you are asked to perform, you find that many factors external to you that keeps influencing you, your day-to-day decision making. And to maintain that level of this thing is very difficult, and we are confronted with so many situations. There will be a situation where you are investigating something, there will be a lot of pressures on you to take a particular view this way or that way. Sometimes your own seniors who are not very cooperative to you. Sometimes you find the overall structure under which you are working is not very helpful. And it's very difficult to work nowadays in government, maintaining a very high thing. But it's always a challenge every day. And if you ask me any practice, so many are there which I don't know whether I could share some of them on a public platform like this. But it's quite possible. And particularly for me, I have been most of my career working in intelligence and investigating type of work, where we have to catch tax evaders, we do a lot of investigation, unravel the modus operandi. And there it's too much of pressure for us, because we keep getting a lot of pressures on us and to take a particular stand. But I think somewhere you have to be always your inner core, your inner strength should guide you. And your inner strength only helps you in such a difficult situation. But I think with all this, we still have been able to maintain our own standards. And that is where you are separate from the rest and you show your leadership skills. Sometimes we may have to look as if you are listening, but at the same time, when you put your pen and all, you should know that what is right should be the ultimate decision you should take.
Sure,
but you asked me some practical examples. I am unable to share because it's not possible.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anjali Dariwal, can you please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question?
Sairam, sir. Thank you for this wonderful explanation on leadership. My question is, sometimes there's a situation when we got stuck and things are not going our way and we feel like we are stuck. So at that moment of time, how should we handle it and deal with it?
Yeah. See, frustrations are very common in a government role, because not only in government, even I'm sure in a private sector and all, often you may not be able to meet the desired target. Often you may not be able to maintain the time limit within which you want to achieve. And there's a lot of bitterness or frustration. And I have always maintained one thing is my education in the Swami or Satsai College has given me was, I've always, Swami has often told, getting only degrees or high knowledge is alone not important. You should be playing on the field well. You should get into cultural activities. You should have so many other activities that when the end of the day you feel you are able to relax yourself and get out of the frustration mode by doing meditation or you do yoga. Or I often do was I like more to see theater. So I would always get into something related with the theater or this music, or I was also good in choreography of dances and all this, which I learned in Satsai College. I was very popular in the Satsai College for my stage performance. All these extracurricular activities are the best way to take your frustration and get you balanced back to the rails by next day morning again when you're in office. And frustrations is a continuous process. It is I know many of my juniors and some of my young officers who joined the department initially. When I keep interacting with them, they say, "Sir, we are frustrated, we are unhappy, we didn't know it is not this thing." Then I always tell them, "What are you having other than this? What is your asset?" Some say they're right, some days they're good at, they say they have a taste for music. Like this, some are good sportsmen. I always encourage them that always have something other than your key area of work, because that is the best way you relax and you keep doing that. So we should not think I'm a big officer in the department. So many people, when I joined service, when I would talk about theater or this thing, because in India we have a stereotypic role of a bureaucrat who is very stiff, who rarely smiles, who is very composed. But I was a little different in the sense I would always like to go out in the field, interact with cultural, organize some small skates here, there for any occasion. When I was very at the level of assistant commissioner, I always found it gives me great relief. And I always advise my youngsters, get into something. Even sometimes now, I have running an organization, the memory of my mother, late mother. It gives me so much satisfaction when somewhere I'm frustrated here and there. I take solace from the other things that keep happening in my life. And our life should be a wholesome thing. You should not be just confined to your work. If you are working in a software, there you are not able to complete a project, you should not get frustrated. There are many other ways to take out this frustration and keep you back on the rails. It is just human to get frustrated. I don't say anybody can escape frustration when you don't meet your targets or your timelines. But you should always have something to get you out of that frustration. Some of you take meditation, some of you do yoga, some of you play, some of you sing, some of you dance, whatever it is that. And I've always successfully done that. I always motivate my youngsters in the service to do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sairam.
Thank you, sir. That was such a practical advice. Kavya, please go ahead and ask your question. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, ma'am. Sairam, sir.
Sairam.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question is. Okay, sir. So my question is, we have a team over with us, and I will be a team leader. What if our teammates or subordinates make comedy and which triggers the emotion of the leader? How can a leader handle such kind of situations, sir?
What they trigger? What I couldn't get them.
No, sir. Like among the emotions, we have something called the comedy as well. If the
Hmm.
teammates make comedy of the team leader and
Hmm.
it triggers the emotion of the team leader, then how should the team leader handle that situation and go ahead positively with the teammates?
No, but why should you allow yourself to trigger when somebody has makes a comedy or takes something in a jest or something like that? I think, yeah,
Yes, sir.
you're
What if
able
it
to say
is?
something.
Yes, sir. If it's personally triggering or very much pointedly making a comedy, which might not sense good to the team leader,
No, no,
if
these
that is
type
the
of
case.
things do happen. But I'm saying, see, what is your purpose? What is your objective there, and how we have to go about? That is more important. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's an emotional stability that is the most important. You should not allow many things come like this. See, you cannot always be. I always tell. See, as a father, I have 2 children. I cannot expect both of them to be like what I want. It's very difficult to ask that both of them should be like what I think, what I feel is good and all. But it's very difficult. So when you have to deal with in your own home, under your own socialization process, 2 children you have raised, each one is different. One is more this thing, another one is less. He is an introvert. The other one is more sociable. When the same social, similarly in a group, people are there of all sorts of things, all sorts of attitudes. Some people would just like to pull down the team leader and all this. This keep happening, and it's your own inner strength that should help you. And you should not be let down or something when somebody tries to pull you down through comedy or try to make remarks. You should just take it. If it is something worth to improve you, you try to do your own. I said in my lecture on this self-analysis. You will be doing self-analysis. If somebody makes a very critical or a very unpleasant comment on you or something, you do your self-analysis. You feel you are the best judge. That is what Swami used to say. A person's best judge is himself. You know how to do self-analysis. You know what are your strengths, your weaknesses. If you feel that what he has made is something which you have to ignore it. But if you feel it is something that, yes, you also agree there is some deficiency in you, please use it to improve yourself. It's always a continuous process of self-analysis. If somebody makes something very funny or a very jocular comment or something which always disturbs you, you just take a honest analysis of you. You feel, yeah, is he making something right or wrong? Yes, if I'm right, yes, I'll go like this. If you feel, yes, I need to improve, maybe there's something lacking in me, I honestly do that every day. My morning walk, I always do that, what happens in the previous day, and I'll try to see, okay, this fellow has commented, this fellow. I keep getting always a feedback. Feedback is very important. Sometimes you should always, that's what I'm saying, you should be always willing to listen. And you constantly get feedback on your own self, on your own decisions, on your own situations. That feedback will help you to analyze yourself. Yes, he has commented like this. Yes, maybe he's right. I'm not taken correct this thing. And maybe that will give you to improve yourself in the next time the same situation arises.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very helpful suggestions and ideas you gave me. It really helps me a lot in further teamworks, I believe, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sai Ram.
Sai Ram.
Thank you, sir. Arvind Mohan, please go ahead and unmute yourself and pose your question. All right, Devyani, unmute yourself and ask a question, please.
Sairam, sir. Sairam, everyone. Sir, my question is, like, as you have been dealing with the narcotics, what is the first and the best action to deal with the person who is involved with narcotics and drugs and bring them back to a real life again? As a youth nowadays get easily involved to that part, sir. Sairam.
Sai Ram, actually, see, we are not involved in the social rehabilitation process as a department. We are mainly involved in collection of intelligence and arresting illegal trafficking of narcotics. So the social getting them this thing, that is a totally, we have a lot of psychologists and people dealing with that type of subject. I'm not a very competent person to deal on how to get them back and all this. But again, I feel again, this is, see, now we have a lot of rehabilitation centers which attend to this problem, where psychologists and all are involved and they give you some treatment. But again, I feel, see, this is somewhere because of our, if somebody has got into this trafficking and people have become addicts to drugs, it is because somewhere the socialized process he has gone through is distorted and he has not been able to correct himself at the right juncture. So it is again something to do with one own analysis of self and how you are brought up, what is the socializing process of you, where you have gone. This thing. But I always feel, though some people say that without a clinical and a sociological approach, it is difficult to get back a drug addict. I always feel it's not a very difficult process, provided again you have strength of your own. You have to come out. It's like any alcoholic or anything who has to come out of it. First, you should have the desire to get out of a situation like this, and it's not very difficult to get out of it. And once you should understand that what is its implications, how it is lowering your prestige, how it is lowering your estimate in public eye, in your own peers, in your own colleagues. When again you do all this type of analysis, you will find something is wrong. And I always tell to addicts is, when you find you are not enjoying, you don't get estimate, your parents don't treat you the same way as you were, and you're being ridiculed by your colleagues, why you have to get into a type of situation where you get into drugs. And see, it's for government or enforcement agencies to keep control, check of all this is a very impossible task. For everything we keep saying why government is not controlling and all. There are limitations for all this. It is, that's why I always say it's a matured and disciplined citizenship, and that is more important in all these enforcement activities rather than some people coming and trying to catch them and say you have to reform yourself, get to a normal life. It's just impossible for some outside agency to do that.
Thank you, sir. Sairam, for valuable information. Sairam.
So, Tejasvi Gulati, please unmute yourself. Close your question. Okay. Satya Rai, please unmute yourself.
This is Satya Rai from West. Sir, can I ask you, what is your perspective, corruption?
Yes, you're not very audible, sir.
Sir, can I ask you, what is your perspective on corruption? Am I audible?
Sir, allow me to repeat his question.
Yeah.
His question is, what is your perspective on corruption? On corruption.
Perception on corruption.
Yes.
Perception on corruption is there should not be any corruption, and we should deal it with a very firm hand. And to reduce corruption now, as in government, we have realized it's more transparency and accountability, and reduce the discretion, because wherever there is a discretion in any organization or anything, let it be, it's corruption is not alone confined to government, it's also in the public private sector, and only discretion breeds corruption, because you are having a lot of discretion and you don't know how to exercise your discretion, how to take a correct decision. So because of this enormous powers of discretion that some person enjoys, he gets into this corruption, people try to corrupt him to take a decision in a particular way. So now what we are looking at this thing is, and we have been able to control much, I've seen in the last 33 years. Now with all this we are relying more on technology, more on this thing, technology, and reduce discretion to the individuals and make it more transparent. Everything is in public domain. Once it is in public domain, you feel you are accountable. And once you are accountable, it's easy to tackle corruption. So I think using of technology, making everything, all the government processes, decision making more transparent, and making every individual accountable for anything wrong or anything is the best way to tackle corruption. And I do agree with all this thing till corruption is not minimized to the extent that we want or every citizen aspires it. But still, I think I have seen myself in at least in our departments where these processes have been corrected, and by reduced discretion, we have been able to control corruption to a large extent.
Thank you, sir. Subbalakshmi, can you please unmute yourself and ask a question?
Sairam sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So my question is that sometimes we get pressed out from our emotions because of the fear or lose hope for not achieving that particular goal. Even sometimes we indicate, or we can say we point out the team for that particular mistake they have done. Being a leader, we should always work as a team, but practically somehow we lose temper. How to handle that, sir?
Hello, can you just repeat? I could not get you.
Sir, allow me to paraphrase her question. So essentially her point is that sometimes as a leader, you would tend to lose control of your emotions.
Yeah.
And you might end up getting annoyed or angry. How do you handle your temper and how do you handle such situations? Is what you say.
See, again, losing about a temper or getting angry is very common. And particularly when you are in a group or leading a vast organization, it's quite possible. But again, I'm saying it is all depends on how you get over it and make yourself more stable. And I feel sometimes here and there showing your anger or something is not wrong. It's not a very negative thing that this thing you should express yourself and say maybe you should not scream or use unparliamentary words when you get angry. But when you are angry that a particular thing has not taken the way that you think, as I was telling in my lecture that you should express yourself to subordinates very firmly that I'm very unhappy, that this is not the way I want it to happen, or this is not the way that you people should conduct yourself. I think you should express it. And I've always been forthright in expressing anything that I see. People may temporarily misunderstand, but when they know you and they see, after all, for a leader, the most important is credibility. When they know that you are always a right man with a lot of credibility, I often advise all my young assistant commissioners this. Our credibility is more important before your subordinates. Then even if you are angry on a particular thing, it doesn't disorient the entire team, or rather they become very demoralized. They know that, yes, today boss is angry means, yes, I've done something wrong. Otherwise, normally he's a man who depreciated. So it all depends on your credibility. I have many times, sometimes I also feel I have unnecessarily become angry or something I could have handled more coolly. But again, I'm said at the end of the day or next day when you come to office again, if you feel you are the team leader, you are a boss, but still you should not hesitate to apologize if you feel that you have lost your temper unnecessarily. If you feel, yes, you are right in losing your temper and getting angry, I'm sure your subordinates would understand depending on the credibility you have in your organization and in your team. So I feel you should not feel that I've got angry. But if you're sometimes we do get angrily unnecessarily without a reason, or sometimes just you are in one of those bad days, you got up from the bed on the wrong side that day and suddenly lost your temper in busy. And at the end of the day, again, I'm saying this self-analysis, I always advise to youngsters should be a continuous process. It is not a separate, this 5 minutes in a day will do. For everything, I got angry. Next time I got, see, in the lunch time when you are having lunch, when you keep thinking you are alone, you should start postmortem your events in the day. Yeah, today morning, unnecessarily I got angry. Then you know whether you are right or wrong in getting angry. If you are feel that you have come to a conclusion that you have unnecessarily got angry, don't hesitate to apologize. Let him be the very low subordinate to you, but you should not hesitate to apologize to him. Then I think it enhances your credibility in front of your that person.
Thank you so much, sir. Sai Ram.
Thanks a lot, sir. Just before we proceed, I just want to check with you, how much more time do you have on hand? Can we go ahead with a couple of more questions, or should we wind up?
Yeah, just.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Aishwarya, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask crisp questions that are to the point.
Sai Ram, sir. I just wanted to ask a very small question. Under pressures, how to become a resilient leadership? How to undergo a resilient leadership?
See, again, I think we have been discussing enough on that. Pressure is quite common. But again, I'm saying it's your evolved and mature leadership skills that matters. Because even a housewife also undergoes a lot of pressure in her. She may be at home, but in handling those things related to her household or getting things from, she goes through a lot of pressure. And at every stage, we have to learn how to handle our pressures. And that handling pressures is something which we should learn through experiences and again through your own introspection. And there cannot be one answer for these type of situations. Handling pressures is something that we should learn over a period of time and evolving your own personality, your own way of handling things. And handling pressures is common to everyone. Let us not think that only I am doing a great job and I am under pressure. Every sphere, like even for example, if you take in I see in my own organization, we have somebody like smallest that like a Havaldar who attends on the senior officers. He also has his own pressure that if he doesn't do something, if he doesn't quickly come in and you want him to carry a file or something, he's under that pressure. But you have to handle all this. This is a part of our life, and I just can't say that this is a one approach by which you can handle. You should learn by your own practice and be more matured in handling these things.
Thank you, sir. Sai Ram.
The last question, Rinaldi, can you please go ahead and ask your question?
Hello.
Hello.
Sai Ram, sir.
Sai Ram.
Sir, actually, I want to ask that if I am actually I'm a leader in school also, little bit. I'm working as a teacher over there.
What?
So,
Can you repeat?
I'm working as a teacher and I am a leader over there for some projects or something. So as a leader, I'm working nicely, but I heard that someone is saying that something at my back. So what should I do? Actually, I have asked already with them directly, but they have split from their words. They have changed their words that we have not said in. So like this or this type of things, if we are facing, if as a leader, so I am doing that, I am ignoring that thing and I am start working. So is it correct I am doing, or I should take care of that, or I should ask with everyone that what is the matter and all?
No, see, this backbiting is very common even in our personal lives, social lives, and in government or any organization. So again, I feel is you should be sensitive to the criticism that comes about you, and use that criticism again to do self-analysis of your own self. If you feel that somebody criticized and you, I'm saying you, as I'm saying that Swami used to say that each one is a best judge of his own self. We know what we are. And if somebody has criticized something and you feel he is wrong, just ignore it. And if you feel it is true, talk. You can play. If I am in your situation, somebody is criticizing me for what I feel I don't deserve that criticism. I would not hesitate to call him and tell him, this is not what is expected from you. I don't appreciate your talking on me like this. And we should have the courage. Maybe sometimes it may lead to a very situation where you may this thing. But I always say that I'm so outspoken. In fact, this is the complaint my wife has on me. She says, you are so outspoken that when somebody is, immediately you keep calling him and asking him. That is one thing if I feel is wrong. If I feel that, yes, there is a point in what he says, I will rather silently accept this thing and try to see where I can improve it. So we should never be afraid of criticism. You should be honest to face a criticism coming or some backbiting coming on you. But if you are feeling that you are aggrieved that it is not something which you deserve, you talk to that person. If you know X, Y, Z has spoken on you, you can invite him for a cup of tea. You can invite him, you can ring him up and say, I heard that you have commented like this. I think I don't deserve that. You will rather feel embarrassed that you are just telling him that he is wrong. I would do that. I would definitely do that if I feel I don't deserve that criticism.
Yes, sir. That only I am doing. Just I am asking with them.
That's a very good thing. But if you should see, criticism is always not negative. Sometimes it's also positive. Sometimes
yes,
so if it is positive, that's what I'm saying, and you feel there is a thing, you just correct it, and later if you get a chance to meet that person again, you tell him, yeah, I heard you commented like that. I feel, yes, I was wrong. I set right. Nothing.
Okay,
there is no ego.
but actually they are not saying that I have said or something. Whenever I am asking with anybody, so they are just changing their words that I have not said like this.
Then don't bother.
Means they
are
not stick to their words. What they have said.
They are not honest in their criticism. They are not owning up. You ignore it. Why you should lose your peace on that? You should never lose your peace. No, see, we are not born to keep on satisfying everybody's this thing. That's what I'm saying. You do your own analysis. If you feel you are right, yes, you proceed further. Why you should be demoralized by somebody's criticism? That way, every day somebody will be criticizing you. Even in your own house, your father may say something which you feel demoralized. Your brother may say something. Your sister may say something.
Yes.
Thank
you so much, sir. Sai Ram, sir. Thank you so much.
So with your permission, we will just take the last question.
Yeah.
Nishant, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question.
Sai Ram, sir.
Sai Ram.
Sir, I have one question. Like, you are also lecturer for a few months, right?
Yeah.
So then how did you choose this administrative job over academic job? Actually, I am also in the same condition. I recently completed my PhD from IIT Madras. And then my childhood dream was to become an IAS officer. But sometimes it is like that academic job is more easier than handling so much of pressure in the administrative part. So how did you choose at the time?
See, actually, I have to get into a very personal tone, because I was always fascinated and interested in academics, in teaching. And government service was never my passion, nor see, unlike many people who write the civil services, I have not gone to any coaching center or anything like that. But see, after I left the college and university, when I came, I was very active in civil liberties, human rights, and I was also a student in Central University of Hyderabad. I had many causes which were very dear to me. I thought academics was the best way for me to realize those. That is, I was also, as I said, I was in the theater, and I was into so many social work which I was doing. These were some of the social causes were very dear to me. So I never thought of government service this thing. But then there is a personal factor. See, I was very attached with my late mother. And like any typical middle class Indian mother, she aspired her son to become a civil servant, this thing. And she didn't want her son to go towards the theater or to the movie or something associated with that. So she was inspiring me that she was a great lady. She was a very great philanthropist. She herself used to get active in many other social issues. And she has, her desire was that she always used to tell me that if you are a lecturer or this thing, you may be only able to educate or talk or espouse a cause. But if you are in a government, you also know how to handle it, tackle it. And she always taught me what Swami said, that you should live a life where you are able to live for others, not alone for yourself. And I thought somewhere then my mother was the main motivating factor. In fact, virtually she compelled me to write the civil service exam, and much against my wishes, I wrote. And her motivation was only one, that government gives you a job where you can live for others and help for others. But I think over a period of time, I don't fully agree with that objective, that it's not so easy to live for others also in government. You have your own limitations, but at least you have the satisfaction that you are able to influence so many people in your way of life, which maybe I would have not been able to do. As a teacher also, you can do it by with your classes, with your students, but you will not be able to get out into a situation where you will be able to make some contribution towards improving a particular situation or something. That is how I came into civil services, not as a passion or an ambition, but it was mainly because of my mother. So I have a personal factor that many people, when you ask a civil service, they'll say that I wanted to do this, that, and all this. My case is a typical reverse scenario. I wanted to teach, I loved teaching, and I was good as a teacher. I was very popular as a teacher in teaching political science in the university. But sometimes, you all of us have our own ambition, but sometimes you have to do something which your mother aspires and somebody you are attached to. So that is how I came into it.
Thank you, sir. Sairam, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir. On behalf of the entire NLP family, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, sir, for carving out time to share some precious guidance and insights on leadership attitudes, behaviors, and practices. Some of the points that you shared here in today's session, for example, self-awareness, integrity, morality being at the as a core competency of leadership. These essentially resonate completely with the National Leadership Program and its core essence. So I sincerely hope that all the participants, young candidates, Mahilas and gents here in this session who have just embarked on the leadership journey will make sure that it is a continuous one, just like you said. It's not a destination, it is an ongoing practice and a journey. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time and guidance. We would now like to end this session with the Shanti Mantra. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much, Sairam, and I am again thankful for giving me this wonderful opportunity to interact with the youngsters. It's more a learning experience for me also. Thank you.
सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु। ॐ